Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Kitchings Table. I'm your host, W. Earl Kitchings. Along with me, my co-host, Ms. Ronleen Kennedy, bringing you another insightful look into topics and newsworthy information as it comes to us each and every week. I tell you, it might seem easy on the other end of the screen, but it is a very challenging thing to come up with something that we feel would be engaging for everyone. So, Ronleen, good morning and good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for everything you do, Earl, on this happy Tuesday morning.
That's a good way of putting it. A happy Tuesday morning. Every morning should be happy, as a matter of fact. I'm sure there are days when putting those feet out of bed to the floor is not what you want to do, but you got to drag yourself out anyway. So, hey, happy Tuesday morning, and we are excited about being here. Ronleen, March is interesting that March follows February from the standpoint of it being another historical month. February is Black History Month, rolls right over into Women's History Month. And I tell you, we're going to be touching on a topic today and a couple of topics because you've brought on a very special guest, but we're going to be talking about women. Specifically, I'm thinking Black women in politics and in looking at the number of Black women who have first and foremost served in Congress, because that is where all government, is as far as federal, it all comes from Washington and back down to the states, but all federal politicians and all federal elected officials serve in Washington, D.C. And over time, we're looking at approximately 50 Black women who are either currently serving or have served in Congress. And that list is headed by the one, the only, the first Black, I'm not going to even say female, I'm going to say the first Black person in this country to run for Congress, the great New York Congresswoman, Ms. Shirley Chisholm.
Yes, yes,
So all of these other ladies are standing on Shirley Chisholm's shoulders. And with all due honor and respect to former Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, who was definitely an icon during the 70s, for all the time she spent in Congress out of New York. She was a no nonsense type of individual, as I'm sure many of these ladies on this list are. But she was very eloquent in the way she spoke at times. And, being the first Black woman in Congress, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine the things she had to deal with, the things that she heard, the things that she blotted out of her mind, because when she heard them, she just couldn't believe people would say things like this. A pioneer in Congress was Shirley Chisholm, and for a long time she was there before Yvonne Braithwaite Burke of California joined her, and then of course the great Barbara Jordan came on the scene out of Texas. Those three women, and I think Chisholm and Jordan probably get the most limelight, although Ms. Burke was there with them. Uh, those ladies probably had to form that unique bond. It's us against the world. I mean, not many of us here. Not many of us here. So, and as they say in a good old boys game, the the table is slanted, the cards are coded. Any kind of way they can get an advantage and take an edge, that's what they had to deal with, and not to mention the disrespect, that they probably had to persevere through. So I'm looking at a list of about 50 ladies from across the country. Many of them came out of California. Our current Vice President Kamala Harris, came out of California. Not many, we have not had many congressional senators who have been black. That number is very low. For a long time, uh, the senator out of Massachusetts, Edward Brooks, was the lone black senator for a very long time. So again, I'm sure between him and Shirley Chisholm or Barbara Jordan, there were unique bonds. I mean, you didn't have a caucus, you didn't have many people that you could go to in that senator setting. And you go in there, you do the best job you can, and you fight the best battle you can, and win as many battles and wars as you can. But you know, when they said the tables are set against you and things are already lined up where you're not supposed to win and they're not going to let you win, you got to be tough. You got to be tough. So kudos to those ladies, past and present, who have given us their time, their energy, their blood and their sweat and their tears for the things they had to go through. And thank God we had them when we did, because life would be a little different. And like I said, a lot of fireballs go up there to Washington, D.C. because they know they got to fight that fight with some folks that, and you just shake your head sometimes and I can't believe they said that, or things they do. But we're glad that they did. What do you think about that?
You're right. You know, you have to have you have to have on your armor and your shield when you're going before the throne, if you will, because you don't know how things are going to turn around in an instant, and you have to think on your feet, and you have to be ready to fire back like a cannon.
Well, no doubt about that. That the first three names I gave you on the list, uh, Chisholm, Burke, and Jordan, they fired off pretty good. So
you
our
can't
topic,
you can't
yeah,
be scared.
you can't be scarred. Can't be
You
scared
can't
if
be
you're going up there now. You can't be
scared.
scarred.
Not at all.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Right.
Not for the faint of heart. You
You're
got
gonna be
it.
scared or you're gonna get scarred. So you can't
Okay.
get it's like, oh no, I need to come home.
And like they say, you got to wear your big boy, your big girl underwears to go up
Yeah, I
there.
didn't want to say
Okay.
that. That's why I
No,
said
I'll
I
say it.
served in
I'll say it. You got to wear your big boy or big girl underwears to go up there to fight battles in
the
Congress.
army.
So today we're going to be talking about women paving the way in politics and more. Specifically, we want to target those black women first who paved the way and did more. And
They
we're going
gave
to,
us a presence. They gave us a presence. One thing that you said in our talks always, how can our agenda get served unless someone is there who understand what we're going through? And the only way to do that is they have to identify with the skin that we're in. They have to understand what we go through on a daily basis to make it. So yes, we need more presence, and this is why we're here today.
and of course, in addition to what she went through as a congresswoman, Shirley Chisholm, when she got on that campaign trail to fight to be the first black president, or the
Yeah.
first person to be the president, a black person to be the president of the United States, those had to be some very interesting times. I'm surprised. I'm surprised. Well, I guess I just never read. I'm sure she had memoirs or a book about her plight in that. But just to know that she fought that fight and she was there to be the first. And there's something to be said about being the first, because you experience a lot more than those who come behind you. So I know she experienced quite a bit, being the first black woman in Congress, being the first black woman to run for president. And I think, we don't even have to put her under the umbrella of scared because Shirley Chisholm was not scared.
No.
You
She
know,
said, I've already been through the fire. There's nothing else you can do
That's
to me.
right. And I was glad that Mr. Shirley Chisholm was there to fight with her. You did, Mr. Shirley Chisholm, now, okay? Yeah, because that's what his name became, Mr. Shirley Chisholm. You know, I'm sure that people don't even know his name for the most part. Well, that's Mr. Shirley Chisholm. Okay. But we are thankful and grateful for her and all the women who have served in Congress. So today you have reached out to a very special person who's going to enlighten us with her conversation. And I'll tell you this about your guest today. She ain't scared either.
No, that's what I
You know,
loved about her.
yeah,
That's what
she
made me vote for him. It's
yeah,
like, hey, if I can put a vote in for it, it's like, let's do this.
yeah, don't let that assassin smile fool you. Don't don't let that assassin smile fool you. It looks very engaging, but don't let it fool you because you know you turn the dial the wrong way, and boy, oh boy, you be like, oh. So I'm going to bring on our special guest today, a phenomenal woman, uh, very outspoken, very focused on fighting for things that are correct and right. She has a passion for what she does. I'm sure she definitely has a passion for uh, doing work from the standpoint of being an attorney. Her efforts with that and wanting to also put her name, she has made the effort, and that's the first thing that you have to do if you're seeking public office. You have to make the effort. So she's done that in reaching out to be a congresswoman from the state of Florida. But my special and Ronlene's special guest today is attorney L.J. Holloway of Jacksonville, Florida. LJ, as she loves to be called, LJ, good morning and welcome to the Kitchings Table today.
Thank you. Good morning. It is certainly my honor to be a guest on the Kitchings Table. Look, I mean, after hearing that introduction, I guess I have to prove to you that, look, I am not a shrinking violet. And while Shirley Chisholm became the first African American Congresswoman in 1968 and ran for president in 1972, the reality is in 2024, we need to make sure that we send someone to represent the people of the 4th Congressional District. Ironically, that is gerrymandered and unconstitutional, but we still need people who are willing to engage in the fight and fight for our rights.
Well said. And I know you are a fighter. I know that. I know that you are a proponent of things that need to be correct and need to be dealt with. And I'm sure that upon your reaching that plateau, uh, they will have, I won't say the next Shirley Chisholm, but they'll be like, oh man, here's one more that is kind of really outspoken. And I'm just curious because when I look at all the women on this list that I have, the sorority of congressional women and that unique body of women. And I'm sure based on you working in Washington and working around them, what kind of synergy and what kind of camaraderie and what kind of continuity do those women bring and have amongst themselves?
Well, let me just say first, Mr. Kitching, you don't get a chance to be a congressional staffer by spilling tea. So I won't spill tea, but what I will say is that when it comes to policy, they do caucus, and sometimes it can be contentious behind closed doors, as you would expect with very strong minded, intelligent people. But notwithstanding any of that, I would like to say that the consensus is after the women in the caucus convene, by the time the convening ends, you better know that there is a strategy and there is a consensus among the people who sign on to a bill, or if it's in markup, they have come to a resolution within themselves, because it's really negotiating. You have to remember that before a bill becomes a law, it's in committee, and they have what's called markup. And you have to negotiating during markup. And while you
Okay.
are negotiating, it's incumbent that you are willing to compromise or give up something to get something. So you have to make sure that you're not just lobbying from your heart, but you also have to lobby from a very strategic place.
Okay. So before I turn you over to Ronline, I do have one specific question because I am just totally enamored by this House of Representative Congresswoman for her. I don't know. She to me, she just is so poignant and she's so direct and she's so at those folks who want to, for lack of words, play games. Have you met Congresswoman Katie Porter, and what are your thoughts about her?
So I have been in the same room with Congresswoman Katie Porter, but I have not had a formal conversation with her. And so
Okay,
my thoughts about Katie Porter are the thoughts I have for any woman who has the courage not only to run, but to win. So we all have different styles, but I love Katie Porter's style.
absolutely,
Yes, and so that's what it is, because look, you don't make it to Congress by not being meritorious, but some people have a more direct style. Some people have what we call the Socratic method, and that's the style that Katie Porter employs. It's called the Socratic method. However, and for her district, that works. However, for someone who is perhaps in a minority majority district, they have to govern according to their district. Your district may prefer a more in your face posture. So I wouldn't say that she is more astute or better than any other congressperson, but her style is Socratic. And I too appreciate the Socratic method.
well, thank you for giving me the term for her style because anytime I've seen that from her, the first time I think I saw her and she was going at someone in a committee and she started bringing up the slides and the posters and all that and asking the people who they were speaking to directly questions where she was giving out these this information that you could see and guys would not have answers. It just stunned me. It's like, she pulled y'all card on this and y'all have no responses and y'all don't know how to deal with her. So y'all just pretty much be quiet. But I just like her method and her Socratic method. And in my humble opinion, her method, but her style, but her energy, to me, I've just in my own way said, well, Katie Porter for president because she certainly will go at these big companies and all these big people at the top of these companies and businesses. She's not backing down to any of them. She's calling them on the carpet, and that's what I like about her. She goes right at them directly with information that they can't dispute, they can't lie about, they can't say, well, I don't know, because she'll make them either fess up or shrink.
Or not remember.
Exactly. Oh, no, that's the other thing. Oh, I don't remember. That's one of the best ones they could ever come up with. Oh, I don't remember.
I
Yeah.
don't
Okay.
recall.
I don't recall. One of the two. One of the two. So anyway, well, thank you for that insight. Well, I'm going to let Ron Lean come in and I'm going to let the two of you have a very good conversation this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll be here listening. But Ron Lean, I'm going to turn Attorney Holloway over to you.
But thank you for that insight.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Uh, as I was reading about you, it was like, man, forget about what I know. I just want to keep reading. So um, I want to talk about two things. Number one is, you are the author of your book. And it says what to do when life hands you a devastating diagnosis. And then I found out that you are the founder of All About Healthcare Advocates. So when I put the two of those things together, I'm like, you know what? This is what happens when when you think about, okay, I can't feel sorry for myself, and I like that little saying. I forgot who said it, but he said, he was talking about the bird had never felt sorry for himself, and fell dead from the bough, but never ever have felt sorry for himself. So with that being said, it's like we as human beings, we understand, just because we're down, we are able to get up, no matter how devastating it may be. If you're still thinking and breathing and you can move your tongue or talk or whatever, or do sign language or whatever, there's still work to do. And so it's no time to feel sorry for yourself. It's like, hey, let's get back into the present. Let's let our say be known, and let's find out what we can do. And so when I read those two things about you, I was like, oh yeah, we gotta talk about that. So tell me about your book, and tell me about the foundation, what your business.
Sure, I'm happy to share that. So, first of all, as you stated, the book is called "What to Do When Life Hands You a Devastating Diagnosis." We have it in both hardcover as well as audiobook. And I wrote that book within 7 days. I was actually in the hospital and I could not walk or talk. People forget that I had a brain tumor, and people forget that your brain tells you to stand up or sit down. And one of the risks, of course, with a brain tumor is look, that particular part of your brain that tells you to stand up or sit down has to heal, and that's what happened with me. However, I still had my cognitive ability, so I was able to write, and so I wrote that book. And in so doing, what was most important for me was to share with people how to advocate for themselves. The disease that I had, I'm saying had because in my heart and my head I am healed. It is very rare. It affects 4 in 1 million. And the medical treatises stated that it affects white males in their 40s. And at the time that I was diagnosed, I was certainly not in my 40s. I'm neither white nor male. So I shared the experience in the book because it's important for people to not just take the word of a physician. So many people go home and they'll say, well, the doctors don't know what's wrong with me. Well, you have to be persistent, take your own notes, and keep going to different doctors until they find out what's wrong with you. In my case, it took 3 years. I was working on Capitol Hill. I worked for Congresswoman Carrie Meek at the time, and she used to call me MC. That was her nickname for me. And MC stands for Member of Congress. And she liked me because I had lots of energy, and I do have a little problem. They call it workaholic in some circles. And I was always available to her. So I started to feel tired and I was having headaches, but I kept going. And after an appointment, first of all, after an appointment, the doctor said to me, you need to find a neurosurgeon right away because you have a very rare disease that people don't typically survive. And when I called John Hopkins, they told me it would be 6 months before I can get an appointment. Well, I would have been dead within 6 months. So, because I knew the member of Congress who, God bless the dead, was Elijah Cummings, his wife Maya Cummings was a Congressional Black Caucus fellow with me. I called, and of course, they made a phone call to get me into John Hopkins. But what about those persons who do not work on Capitol Hill or do not have relationships? And so that was my concern. And that's really why I wrote the book for John Q. Public, for the person who doesn't have a name, who doesn't have a person they can pick up the phone and call. Too many people in our country die because they don't have adequate health care. And we know that in a country as rich as ours, people should not die from lack of health care. And you do have people who have insurance, but there are so many people who are underinsured, and there are just as many who are uninsured. We live in a state, the state of Florida, that refused to expand Medicare. And there are about 2.5 million Americans in the state of Florida who don't have access to care. So that's why I wrote the book. And I talk about a lot of issues in the book, not only about advocating, but also my personal experience. Looking for, trying to find what was wrong with me. So I went to a DO who didn't accept insurance, and those appointments were $800 a pop, and talked about even Western medicine, how we believe when you go to a doctor, if they don't give you a prescription, something's wrong with the doctor. But that particular doctor he spent 4 hours with me, and he was on to uncovering what was wrong with me. But he pulled out a treatise and he scratched his head and looked at me crazy and licked a page, read some more. So, needless to say, had I stuck with the doctor who I dubbed as a quack in the book, he probably would have uncovered what was wrong with me sooner. But because I am, an American, and I'm accustomed to, after two visits, if you don't have a prescription or someone tells you what's wrong, you think the person doesn't know what they're doing. But in fact, he was trying to uncover what was wrong with me. And because A, I was impatient, and B, I too am a victim of a sick care system, because he didn't give me a prescription and practice on me, because it is the practice of medicine. I went on and continued to travel around the country from Stanford, where I eventually had my tumor removed, to Mayo Clinic, on down to a million endocrinologists and neurosurgeons trying to uncover what was the malady. So I say all of that to say, especially to your listeners, don't just take the word of someone who says, well, we can't find anything wrong. You know your body better than you. And if you feel that there is something that is not in alignment, you should continue until you either feel better or find someone who can give you a plausible explanation.
Well, thank you. That's well said, because as you say, we're with our bodies 24/7. We don't get a break, and we know the onset of something that's coming on that doesn't feel right. And you're right. We're in that, that right now kind of mentality, to where, if someone doesn't process what's going on with you right now, the first thing you want to do is find someone who can tell me, because I don't have much time in order to get down to the bottom of this situation. And sometimes, as they say, patience is a virtue. That's something that has to be practiced. Give a person time to figure it out. Even in my case, I'm not that textbook diagnosis, to wherein it's like, okay, if she has a nosebleed, then what pertains to nosebleeds, and they may end up missing it because I'm not what they study. So yes, I do understand that, and thank you for sharing with that. All right, and so we're going to go to our little break just a little tad bit early. You are now listening to the Kitchings Table, and we have our special guest here, Miss LaShonda L.J. Holloway. She is an attorney, and she a dynamic speaker, and she's just dynamic in just about everything that she does. And right now we're going to come back and we're going to talk to her about her time being a founder of All About Healthcare, and what did she discover while she was going to Harvard. So we'll turn it back over to you, LaShonda.
Thank you so very much. So, consistent with the book, What to Do When Life Hands You a Devastating Diagnosis, after I began to walk and talk again, I wanted to know how I could help other patients. And so at the time, this was 2009, when it was 2009 when I started working on All About Healthcare Advocates. And advocate wasn't a household name. So oftentimes people didn't even know what I was talking about. So I'd have to explain to them that we will help you navigate the healthcare system and help you to do research, to help you find relief. But at the time, of course, now hospitals have, patient advocates. But at the time, look, there wasn't such a thing. And what I found as the founder of All About Healthcare Advocates is the middle class was dying, either because they couldn't afford copays, or they would not seek care because of the amount of money they'd have to spend out of pocket, or choose to forego treatments. And we found that there were a lot of seniors who were either retired teachers or retired firefighters who, although they had insurance, they had so many prescriptions, they were taking either half a pill or skipping days, and were either foregoing meals to take pills. And that just didn't sit well with me. And there were so many people who would just go to the doctor and shake their head and not understand what the doctor was saying to them, or they would forget what the doctor was saying. And I knew that, what? We need to make sure that we not only get Medicaid expansion, and at the time, before I opened All About Healthcare Advocates, that's when Obama was running for president. And then we know that Hillary Clinton had initially introduced a universal health plan. And of course, the House and the Senate were vehemently against it under the Clinton administration. But Obama made that his hallmark, and it is absolutely his seminal work for more people to be covered with healthcare insurance. And of course, the Affordable Care Act eventually passed. But the harsh reality is he wanted to eliminate pre-existing conditions, because so many people could not get coverage because they had pre-existing conditions. And so All About Healthcare Advocates help patients to navigate the healthcare system. One of my favorite patients, God bless the dead, she died at 105, but she was diagnosed with breast cancer at age 98. And the doctors had never seen anyone with breast cancer at 98. Typically, people develop the onset, excuse me, or symptoms and much earlier in life. Well, this particular woman only had one child, and that one child was 76 when she called me. At 76, her eyesight was failing. Excuse me. She was not accustomed to the internet, so she didn't go on and do the kind of research or the deep dive or the depth of breadth that you or I would do. And as God would have it, we had a mutual acquaintance who suggested that she call All About Healthcare Advocates. Well, when I met this particular woman, she said, I'm old, whatever I have, I'm going to meet my maker with it. She said, but if you say that I need to have it removed, I'll have it removed. And I said, no, ma'am, I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot make that decision for you. But what I promise to do is get all of the information to help you and your family make the best decision for you. Well, on staff, I, of course, had a physician. I also had a physician assistant. I also had nurse practitioners, and we consulted with a number of surgeons and a number of oncologists before we presented to her all of the options. Well, the option they chose was just to remove the nodule and to just treat her to ensure that she would be comfortable. And God bless the dead, but God saved her and kept her for 7 years. And her daughter called me when she decided to move her to hospice. And of course, I, told her, we did all that we could, and that God's will would be done, that no man knows a day or hour. Well, she called me the next day, and I said, yes, ma'am, you called me. But what I realized is she was trying to get me to come. Well, you have to know that I will fight for the living, but I did not want to go because I did not want to see her in that state. Well, as God would have it, she called me a third time, and I knew that I had to go. And Ronleen, I will tell you that when I walked in the room, the mother was trying to say something to me, but of course she was weak. I didn't know what she was saying. And I looked over the daughter, I asked her how she was doing. And she said, LaShonda, I don't know, because she was an only child. And she said, I don't know what I will do without Mother Dear. And I said, you will do the same thing you did when you all came from New Orleans to Florida, and you will trust God. And when I said that, she took a great big sigh. And when she took that great big sigh, her mother passed. So it was as if they were waiting for me to come. And I still to this day don't know what the patient was saying, but I do know that when I ran to get the nurse and came back in, the daughter hugged me. She said, LaShonda, I didn't want to be here by myself if Mother Dear passed. She said, and God sent you. And when she said, when I told her, I guess you'll do what you've always done, when she took that sigh of relief, her mother took her last breath, just to let you know how strong that bond is between a mother and child, that the mother could take her rest when she realized her daughter realized that she could go on. So I share that to say that I am very proud of the work and being the founder of All About Healthcare Advocates, because to advocate means to comfort. And while it looks like, I have run for Congress, the harsh reality is I have run for Congress because I am crazy enough to believe that leave and liberty and justice for all, but also to believe that those who are yet unborn and those who are currently in this country should be comforted. And we know that there are too many people who who lack healthcare, but who also have inadequate housing and inadequate public schools. So, for all of those reasons, I do run for Congress. And starting All About Healthcare Advocates is what led me to Harvard. Of course, I went to Harvard because I realized there are so many people dying from maladies, oftentimes because of the pill meal. We know that for a number of reasons, minorities in particular, and because I sought to represent people in a majority minority district, I realized that it's called Gadsden County. It's Florida's only majority minority county. And they found that a lot of people who were going to was only one doctor, and he would come 2 times a week. But a lot of people in that county were dying, and they didn't understand why all these people were dying, and come to realize many of those people were diagnosed with diabetes, and Pfizer knew that a particular drug would affect minorities differently. And so people don't necessarily realize that we have biostatistics, and I studied biostatistics and epidemiology at Harvard for those reasons, because oftentimes when people get a prescription, they trust their doctor, but they don't read the pharmacology, which is that little insert that comes with it. And oftentimes they'll say, we had a study, or it'll say it was studied on so many people, but it doesn't give you the racial makeup of the people who were studied. And it may say, 5 people died out of 100. Well, were those 5 people people of color? Because while we all bleed and we all will die, the reality is there are certain things that are unique to each person's makeup. We have melanin, some people don't have melanin. Look, we found that most people who come from Africa had a diet heavy in vegetables, right? And even after the Middle Passage and people came to this country, people only ate meat maybe on Sunday, and we used to have a joke that the preacher got the best part. And if you got a piece of chicken, you were lucky, because that whole chicken fed a family sometimes of 12 to 15. Well, now at one sitting, people will have 2 to 3 pieces, which is almost half a chicken. Or they ate, proteins, legumes, beans, maybe rice. But the reality is they would have fish maybe on Friday, and you had meat on Sunday, and not a lot of meat. And I think a lot of the sicknesses and illnesses that are born in particular in our culture come from our diet. We know that the body will heal itself. We also know that, they didn't have cars back then, right? So people worked, they used all of their body parts, whether they were farmers or enslaved, and people walked. And we find that most Americans now have a sedentary lifestyle. And I regret the fact that I know, and I am as guilty. But I too was born in the time that I was born, and I don't exercise as much, and I do drive short distances. I'm not proud of that fact, but I also know the impact that it has on our health, and so that's why I went to Harvard and studied, epidemiology and biostatistics. And who knew that I would live to see a second pandemic? We did have one pandemic in this country before the most recent pandemic, but that pandemic was only in theory, was only, past tense. And this particular pandemic was interesting to live through, but we learned a lot about this country, the world, and our habits.
Yes, I said to my son one day when this pandemic was declared, I said it's going to be some good things that come fall out from this pandemic, and he was like, "I don't, with all of the people dying, I don't see how that is." And I said, "Well, I said it's going to be a lot of things that's going to come out that we weren't privileged to before." And it's going to make you more aware of everything that you've ever learned in your health book that you need to start practicing. I said, so it's going to be some lives turned around. Yes, it was a lot of lives lost. We lost a lot of people, people that I know personally. But to see what has happened, um, the people are paying attention now to what they're doing. Um, you know, I gotta say this. There are a lot of people who went back to their old ways too. but
Because
for those,
the
yeah,
brain is
but
the
for
largest
those,
muscle, and the brain is the largest muscle, and it has memory. So yes, I mean, you can break a cycle, but the brain does have memory, and oftentimes people go back to their habits. And that's why, I tell people that yes, the brain is the largest muscle we have, and it does have memory. That's why, despite a brain tumor, I still have recall and can remember things, when I was a child. And so that pandemic, of course, we were quarantined, what, for about 4 months. But
mm,
the reality is, look, the brain has memory.
yes,
So
one of the
unless a person makes a conscious decision to change, they will revert back.
okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with me because, like I said, I was looking like, did you not learn anything? Because I know I did, but that's what it was. We were fighting against that large muscle that's been practicing things wrong for a long time. I get that. I get
Yes.
that. We didn't understand the threat.
Yes.
Understand. Okay, I do understand that. All right, so now let's talk about the run for Congress, the relining of things, and let's give the people something to just really think about what they have to pay attention to in their own state.
Sure. So I will say that what we're finding is not new. I like to call this Jim Crow 2.0, because we had more. It's interesting that Mr. Kitchings discussed Congress, but we had more Black people in Congress and Black men in the Senate during Reconstruction than we have had post Reconstruction collectively. There has only been 11 African Americans in the Senate since Reconstruction, and he was correct with Senator Brooke being the first African American male post Reconstruction. However, during Reconstruction, there were more than 11 men in the United States Congress. And what happened after so many Black people were able to vote and elect people in the United States Congress to represent them? They started to change laws. We know those laws as Jim Crow laws. And that's why oftentimes when you hear people say, oh, they were the first congressperson, after Reconstruction, because before Reconstruction, there were more people of color because at after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, of course, if you own land, you could vote. And so many enslaved people had land and they were able to vote and they turned out to vote. During the Obama campaign, more Black people than ever turned out to vote. And of course, people in power, of course, they realize that there are more Black and brown people than there are white people, and that by 2030, they will be the minority. And you're seeing now laws being introduced in all across the country and courts being stacked to implement laws so that they can maintain power. And so that's why I call that Jim Crow 2.0. And so you wanted to know about the districts. When you stack a state legislature, the state legislature draws the congressional districts. In the state of Florida, where I reside, as a result of the census, there are 28 congressional districts. Well, as a result of the districts that Governor Ron DeSantis drew, and that the state legislature failed to hear the case or draw the maps, the reality is there are now 20 seats that are held by Republicans and 8 seats that are held by Democrats. Well, the people in the great state of Florida voted for what is called fair maps. So fair would be 14 Democratic districts and 14 Republican districts. However, we know that that's not a balance. And also, the United States Constitution amended the right to vote, and included in that was the establishment of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act to include minority representation. Because if you did not have a provision for minorities to have representation, then minorities would never have a representative in Congress. So that's why it's important to draw minority districts, because but for those districts being drawn, minorities, but given the name minority, are in the minority and would never be able to elect a majority to hold a seat. This particular governor drew a district. He drew actually 6 districts and eliminated majority minority districts. So in the seat that I actually ran for, not once, not twice, but 3 times, for the love of the people and for adequate representation, it has been changed every time I've run. The first time I ran, it was a district that went from Jacksonville to Orlando and also encompassed parts of Ocala, right, and parts of Palatka. Then it changed and it went from Jacksonville, Florida, past Tallahassee, Florida, to Gadsden County. That was more than 250 miles. And then this last time that I have run, the district encompassed 2 red counties, which was Clay County and Nassau County, and parts of Duval County, the north and west quadrant, another district that was gerrymandered and unconstitutional. Much to my chagrin, though, the governor is just one part of the equation. We understand that we win when we vote. We had our first African American president as a result of people turning out the vote. And that's why you see so many laws, so many egregious laws suppressing the right to vote. And we call that voter suppression. And so that's why I take the time to do this little voter education to help people to understand that, Congress has 435 members in the House and 100 members in the Senate. Each state has 2 representatives in the Senate And each state, of course, has a number of House of Representatives according to the US Census and the populace. Each congressional district covers 750,000 people. For all those reasons, everyone deserves adequate representation and everyone deserves the right to vote. We know that in the state of Florida, people who are convicted felons, there are more voter suppression tactics that have been implemented to prevent people from voting. But there are organizations that are working every day, which one in particular that I'd like to share with your voters, the Florida Restoration of Rights Coalition, that's FRRC.org. They not only are helping people to get their rights restored, but they're also paying fines and fees. And so I'll say that again, that's FRRC.org. So I want to bring that to the attention of your listeners, but also to remind people that if you have a person within your sphere of influence who is 17 years old in 6 months, they can register to vote so that they will be eligible to vote. And for those persons who want to change their party or who don't know if they're registered, they can always go to their county supervisor of elections office. And you can also register to vote to participate in an election 29 days prior to an election. We know that there's a presidential preference election in Florida on that's on March 20th. And today is Super Tuesday. So for your listeners in a number of states, today may be election day for them. And I hope that they would exercise their right to vote. It is their civic duty to participate in the process because laws will be made and decisions will be made. So you might as well participate and have some say in the process, you know. I, of course, ran for Congress. And of course, you may have seen a sign like this that says Holloway for Congress, just for that reason, because I understand what's at stake and it's important for all people to vote. In the last election, I am a Democrat, and there were 75,000 people in my county who did not exercise their right to vote. They were registered, but did not bother to go to the polls. So we have to not only educate voters, but we also have to engage voters to overcome some of the apathy that we see at the polls and in many municipalities.
Thank you so much. So, real quick, before we get off the air, I just want to acknowledge you as our African American acknowledgement for today. And what I want to leave the guests with, you know, we as women, what message do you have for the women? Just tell us that.
Well, what I will say to the women is the only difference between us and males is we lack a Y chromosome, but we all bleed and we all breathe. And so I would say to women, use your voice. You have a voice. You can vote. We know that women can multitask. It is Women's History Month. And so I would ask every woman who does not put herself first to learn self care, put yourself first. Even on the airplane, they tell you, you know, to use the mask and cover your face first, because as women, we oftentimes take care of everyone and put ourselves last and take care of ourselves last. And so I would encourage women to take care of themselves first, because if you're not good, then you don't have the strength and the capacity to help others. I often would say on the campaign trail that it's incumbent upon me to do better about taking care of myself, because you know that whenever there's a mess, we need a woman to clean it up, or oftentimes women will clean it up. And so I say that there is a mess right now in the United States Congress, and we need more women to clean up the mess. More importantly, I worked for a member who was on the Appropriations Committee. And you have to know that there are trillions of dollars that is appropriated. And we know that when women have a piece of bread, everybody gets fed. Oftentimes, if a man has a piece of bread, men learn early to feed themselves first. So if a man has a piece of bread, he's going to eat first and he'll offer you what's left over, or if there's some crumbs, you can have the crumbs. But you do know that women, look, not only are nurturers, but women take care of everyone. So, women, I am encouraging you to take care of yourself first, but to also continue that nurturing spirit to take care of others, but that we should also make ourselves a priority, because when we are stronger and better, we have a capacity to love and to lift more people.
All right. Well, thank you so much, JD Holloway. Thank you. All right. So, Earl Kitchens, take it away.
Well, we'd like to thank Attorney LaShonda L.J. Holloway for being our guest here this morning on the Kitchens Table. Thank you so very much for all your insightful words. Thank you, that God bless you to continue to have good health after all the health issues you experienced. So continue to do good work, continue to fight the good fight, and continue to speak from a passion, from your passion. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. Ronline, that's going to do it for us today on the Kitchings Table. Great show. Great having our guest today. So until next Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., as we always say here on the Kitchings Table, do something good for somebody else today. Take care, everybody. See you next week.